Go. 3, 2, 1. We are joined now by the woman who finished 5th overall at the CrossFit Games, member of Underdogs Athletics, Alex Gazan. Alex, how you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you taking the time. I know you had a crazy morning.
All good. Thank you for being patient.
Not a problem at all. We appreciate you joining us. When we talked to you before the games, I know we asked you, like, what would have to happen this season for you to look back and say, hey, this was a success? I imagine finishing 5th and, being within reach of a spot on the podium would be successful. But how did that reality measure up to what your expectations were going into the competition?
Yeah, it was really interesting. Like, if you had told me that was the outcome a week before the games, like, I would have been, like, speechless and super stoked. And, of course, like, I'm super happy. But it was really weird. Like, I think, like, halfway through the games, like, after day 2, like, once you kind of have a taste of, like, potentially reaching the podium, like, I feel like the goals just shift and, like, yeah, I don't know. It was a really interesting experience for sure.
And, kind of going back towards the beginning of it, you had I'd say a middle of the pack finish to start, but then you started to chip away with some top 10 finishes and some strong finishes. At what point did you start to feel like you were in your groove, at least for this year, and you're like, okay, this is maybe going to be a little bit different, maybe a little bit better than last year, and I feel like I'm in the pocket where I need to be?
Yeah, I mean, day 1 I feel like was kind of like the first of it. I didn't really have strong feelings about it, and I was kind of like, okay, like, middle of the pack, like, I kind of expected that. The chipper I was super stoked with. Like, I think getting 6th kind of was like, okay, like, maybe you can hang with the girls. The gymnastics event that night, I was like, okay, I'm not a gymnast, like, I'm just gonna survive here. But I think day 2 for me was, like, really eye-opening, because I feel like day 2 was kind of a broad, like, variety of tests, and I feel like being able to stay in the top 10 all day in those workouts was, like, really special for my headspace.
How is this year compared to last year when you think about the overall experience and even just your mindset of the up and downs through competition?
Oh man, I would say, like, they're completely different. Last year was so fun because I had no expectations. Like, making the games was just such a cherry on top that, like, I'm competitive, so I obviously didn't want to, like, do terrible, but, like, I was just happy to be there and, like, learn from each event. Whereas, like, this year there definitely was that, like, expectations from myself and maybe others. And so I think I had a lot more nerves, like, every single event. Like, Justin could probably tell you, like, I just was, like, super, like, straight face, like, not upset at all, but just so nervous, like, and it kind of, like, was a very different feeling for sure.
Why do you think that was? Because normally people say, like, their second time around that things get a little bit easier. Why do you think that affected you more the second time?
I think when you know, like, you can do well and you know that people are expecting you to do well, like, it's that fear of, like, either letting others down or yourself down. And so yeah, I feel like I just had I still didn't know, like, okay, I think I can do well, but what am I gonna do? And I think that was probably where the most of my nerves came from.
Well, the start of you doing well came in, I would say, one of the most interesting circumstances I've ever seen on the field of play. And I know you know what I'm talking about. And it's the alpaca. And you have a top 3 finish. Phenomenal, start to the day. But you almost did it without, wearing any shoes on your Grizzlies. Like, talk us through that. Like, I know you've probably talked through this ad nauseum, but I want to hear, like, what's going through your head at the time. What was the decision? How aware were you at the moment? And, like, what was your reflections with Justin after?
Oh, okay. I'll start with the event itself and then afterwards. I think, like, we had tested that workout in various variations, like, in training, because we kind of had a feeling it would come up. So we did, like, the original version, we did, like, a pegboard version, and honestly, at that point, like, I wasn't afraid of the workout anymore. Like, I knew how bad it was going to feel. Like, I knew it was going to be hard. But I wasn't ready for that workout. Like, it was so much harder than anything we'd practiced. Like, the sled just, like, didn't move. It was so hot. Like, I remember literally after my first 2 rope climbs, I was like, I'm already at a red line. Like I'm toast. And but I knew like because like those rope climbs are a pretty big strength, like I could just like kind of use that as like my place to like make ground. And like getting to the third round and like having a bit of a lead, I was like super excited, like think like, oh, like this could be my first like event win. And at that point I was dying. Like after the rope climbs, I like dumped water on myself. Like I just was like trying to finish. And I got to the sled and it didn't move. I was like, oh no, like this is gonna be terrible to try to finish. And I could feel my shoe kind of like slipping a little bit once I started to move the sled. I didn't think it was gonna fall off, but I like could feel it like moving. And kind of out of nowhere, I just like face planted into my sled because my shoe like slipped off. First response. There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, perfect. My first initial response was like, oh no, like you just hurt so bad for nothing. Like if you don't finish this workout and people pass you, you just expended so much energy trying to win and it's going to be for nothing. Like if you get a middle of the pack score because you're just like standing here. So that was my first thought, was like, oh no. And then Emma Tall obviously finished, Laura finished. And then I could hear the announcers saying that Alexis and Emma Lawson were like really close. And I just like, at that point, just put my toes in my shoes because I took my shoes off originally thinking like no shoes is better than one shoe and I could push it barefoot. But Chuck waited until I took both off. I took both socks off and I'm like starting to push and he comes over and he's like, you got to put them back on. And like, my hands were useless. My shoes were triple knotted. Like there was like the level of panic was like, oh no. So I ended up just putting my toes in and luckily I was able to cross the line, but that was
You got
an
some
event.
strong toes.
Yeah. Sheesh.
Afterwards, like Justin, I mean, I would have paid big money to like watch the event.
I'm upset. I didn't even see him
man.
during that event, but does anybody have video of him on camera?
I saw him during the semifinals, and I know he was so I can only imagine.
Know, that's why this would have been great.
You know why you didn't see him? He wasn't out there. He gets too nervous, so he stays in the warm-up area and watches on the TV because he gets too nervous.
Oh man.
Oh man, whatever like non-completely silver gray hairs he has in his beard were probably just decimated by that.
Poor guy.
But
yeah.
But I guess it's also like a testament to how well you're doing in that event that you could face plant, have a shoe come off, take the other shoe off, and then put the shoes back on, and then still cross the finish line in third.
Yeah, I feel like in the moment it was like hard to like be excited about it because I felt just like disappointed. But I feel like once like there was some comic relief, like some reels started pouring out and people started making jokes, like it ended up actually being like a really funny moment to hold on to.
What was that conversation with you and Justin after that event?
I was like kind of in the ice bath, just like kind of bumming, and he was kind of like like frustrated. But it was like positive. I don't think we really talked. I think we both just like understood what happened and we're like, dang.
But it's so funny because obviously you know what happened, but correct me if I'm wrong, at the time it was your best career finish at the CrossFit Games. So it's like, there's like this double-sided element to it where, I maybe could have had the win or we're right there, but the consolation prize is that you get 92 points, and you moved up into the top 10.
Yeah, it's like funny, right? Because like if you didn't know what happened and you're like, oh, third, like sick. It was more just like in my head, like that was like, oh, like this is my event to win this weekend. So it was just like, a little bittersweet, but still, it was a good memory now. Like now I'm kind of like, oh, it's fun.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this before, but we're obviously big fans of Justin Cotler. But what makes him such a good fit for you right now?
I think he just cares more than like anyone else I've ever met in the space. Like sometimes to the point I'm like, okay, please don't stress because you're gonna stress me out because he just like is so excited. But like he just really cares, and like I was saying this to someone the other day, but like when you get a let's fucking go from Justin, like nothing else feels quite like it. Because he also doesn't blow smoke up your butt. Like he'll tell you how it is. He'll tell you like if something's not good, or like he won't tell you something was good unless it is. So I just like appreciate like how real he is about stuff. And I'm also just a really big like family, like relationship based person, and so I appreciate like that aspect, and like I love his wife and his kiddos, and like it just feels very like family.
For sure.
Well, and even when you think about your finish overall, when we spoke to Justin during semifinals and after semifinals and before the game, he had all of these expectations right on the money that you were going to perform exactly how you did and essentially place the way you did. Is it hard for you to almost catch up to his belief system of like some of the like athleticism that you do have? And do you feel like sometimes you have to trust him more than yourself because he knows you that way?
Yeah, I think like that's definitely been something I've like been learning over the like past years. Like he'd say something like, no, like you're on crack, like you don't know. But then he'd be right, and I'd be like, okay, like. And I kind of just am learning, like, he doesn't say something unless he truly believes it. And I think he's been around long enough to, like, know what he's talking about. So definitely, like, starting to just listen. And if he says so, then I'm like, okay.
One thing that really impressed me about your games weekend is over the years, I've seen athletes get, I don't want to say stuck in a rut, but they get caught in these almost like these packs, right? If you start the weekend with some 15ths, some 18ths, that's just kind of where you fall into. It's almost like that becomes the expectation, and your previous results kind of dictate your future. So I'm always impressed by athletes that can break out of those little pockets and elevate their game and rebound from tough finishes. And I think you did that twice. You know, you were kind of maybe a couple middle of the pack finishes on day one, really strong day two. You had a couple finishes mid-pack again, and then you rebounded again towards the end. How do you get outside of that? Is that something that you've always been able to do? Is it a conscious thing, or is there something that you guys do specifically to help you elevate your game in the face of, you know, some, I guess, not great finishes?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think like day one, I didn't really know what to expect. So like I think I finished day one in like 11th or somewhere around there, and I was kind of like, okay, like that's close to top 10, which is like was my goal throughout the weekend. And I think I'm pretty good at doing event by event. I think semifinals taught me that like really big time, just after having like a really essentially a bombed event with the snatch workout. And like if I wanted to win, I didn't really have a choice but to like let it go and execute. And so I feel like with the CrossFit Games, like every event is its own opportunity, and if you can compartmentalize it like that, then it definitely helps.
You now have a whole lot of data to work with as you move forward, not only for the rest of the year, but now on into the next season. So given what you learned at the games and what maybe you and Justin have talked about, what is the plan now for the rest of this year and then heading into 2024?
Yeah, so we're working with Chris Hinshaw right now for like aerobic stuff, and so we just have a big plan of like making a bigger aerobic base. So like those events like the bike and the run where it's like middle of the pack, like ideally those turn into like top 10s. And so just working on a lot of that aerobic fitness. And obviously my snatch hasn't been very consistent in competition, which is a big goal. Unfortunately, I feel like I'm like allergic to snatching. Every time like I'm like hit like a solid training block, something happens. Like right now I'm dealing with like a bone bruise, so I can't snatch, which is really frustrating. But that's obviously the ultimate goal, to like work on that this season once the body allows. And otherwise just kind of like keep chipping away, laying bricks, and just one thing at a time.
What did your post games routine look like? I imagine that coming off like such a high, there's a mix of emotions of maybe wanting to like keep that ball rolling or even like take some time away. I'm curious what it looked like for you.
Yeah, the week after I got sick, I don't know if I like was getting sick like the last day or whatever, but like the day after the games, I was just like so didn't feel good, and that lasted probably like all week. Like the first 2 days were kind of just like I didn't feel good, and then I got like sick symptoms like a few days later. So the first week was just like zombie mode, like adrenal system was trashed, body was trashed. After that, I went to Oregon for a couple weeks and spent time with my family, and that was really nice. Like it was really fun to work out just for health and like to move, not to train. And so I did a lot of hiking, like just I did some class workouts with my home gym, and then once I came back to Vegas, like it kind of just like slowly ramped up into training. And part of me feels like it's like obviously pretty soon. I'm like, oh, Rogue's like another games, like that's a quick turnaround. But I still have another month, so I'm hoping like within a month, like the headspace will be there. Like I feel like physically I feel fine, but like I'm still waiting for that. Like I want to compete to come back, and that's not quite there yet.
Well, and I don't think you're alone with that, because even just like scrolling through Instagram, maybe to us it seems like it's been a while since the games, but I'm sure if you're an athlete competing at the games, it doesn't seem like a lot of time off before Rogue. How do you like switch back into competition mode, even if your body doesn't necessarily feel like it's ready, but knowing that Rogue is one of the biggest off-season events?
I don't know. I didn't get last year I got 24th at the game, so I didn't get an invite, and I was in no shape to do the qualifiers when they came out. So I just told myself Rogue will be there when I earn it. And so this is kind of my first time, obviously, like having to rebound from the games. And yeah, I don't know. So we'll find out.
Just to build off of that, we talked to a lot of athletes, and we talked to Brent Pikowski about this with the PFAA about what the season needs to look like and what the off season needs to look like. For you, what do you think the off season needs to look like for you to maybe have adequate opportunities to make a little additional money, but B, also rest up so you're at full strength when you hit the game season?
Yeah, I have no clue. I feel like there's definitely been a lot of like different ideas floating around, like having the worldwide ranking system, and like you can essentially skip the open or whatever. Or yeah, there's just been like a lot of different ideas. I don't know. I feel like it'd be nice if like maybe some of the off-season comps weren't so destructive. That was something we talked about. Like if there were more competitions that were like a semifinals level of volume rather than like competing at the games 3 times. Because I think Rogue originally was like supposed to be like an exhibition style competition, and then it was like slowly like more heavier, faster, harder. And just through the grapevine, like from athletes that I know, like people felt really trashed after Rogue, like physically. So maybe something more sustainable in off-season comps, or just like maybe we don't have to do the open and quarterfinals, and that gives us like 2 months of less like messy training, I guess would be the word.
I think Rogue provides a wider strike zone with some of the implements that they throw in, some stuff that's unusual and new, or utilized in a different way. Whether that's like the cyclone bag or the log or going on the trail. Do you think that? And this is just me spitballing. Do you think maybe that adds to the soreness or to the body feeling banged up from that, just because it's maybe stuff you don't train a lot and you're coming off a down cycle where you're maybe resting?
Maybe again, like I'm just going through what other people have said. Obviously the events I feel like at Rogue are like a little bit on the heavier side, more strongman side, which I love. So I'm super excited like to have that more biased programming. But I think it's just like, again, no matter what style of events you're doing, if you're doing 3, 6, 9 to 12 events, like you're gonna feel a little beat up.
Yeah.
Do y'all have a big hill in Vegas to practice?
Ira and Ava went running on some hill. I haven't personally seen any. I'm sure you could go like up in the mountains a little bit.
Well, you were in Kawaii, so you got to do the trail run. So was that a little bit of your pre-Rogue prep? And I got to see you out there. We hung out a little bit. How was your experience as a whole?
Oh, I love it there. It's so great. The trail run was awesome. I kind of did it more just like casual, like 8 miles at my own pace. And I got to visit with some friends, and it was really, really beautiful. Like you're running through essentially like the forest of Kauai, and there's a ton of kids that are doing it barefoot, and you're like watching by you. It's so impressive. And
Wow.
you also just know you're like supporting a really cool cause. And yeah, it's wonderful. If you're listening and you're considering, I highly recommend going. It's so, so awesome.
When you finish 5th at the games, all of a sudden you get expectations that come along with that. How have you, and maybe it's way too early to ask this, but how have you managed that, knowing that, okay, I've been there. Now the expectations are that either I get there again or I do better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Justin and Chris and I had a conversation while I was in Oregon, and essentially like for me, the hardest part about training and competing is the fear of letting other people down. And I would say like my husband and Justin and like now Chris are probably like high on that list as coaches. Like I just have that like kind of mentality. Like for me, a lot of it is performing for who you're working with. And so like I just was like really honest, like I want to be good, but I also like I don't want to be afraid to text you and be like, hey, like this morning I was supposed to hit this pace and like I just couldn't. Because I'll give you an example. Like before, a lot of my monostructural pieces were like 5 rounds of 50 cal bike, get faster each round, where it's like you kind of just get to go by feel and you kind of like do what you're at. Whereas like with Chris, like everything's a lot more specific. It's like you're holding this pace for this long and then this pace for this long, and with that comes a lot of vulnerability. And like there might be days where you crush it, but there's also going to be days where like the paces feel impossible. And I think that's scary, and I think that's where a lot of like stress comes, is when you're like, oh no, like I can't do this. So for me, just like managing like communication with Justin and Chris, and like I want to be really good, I want to be on the podium, but I also just want to like do it at my own pace.
Yeah. It's what is that? You mentioned that, the fear of maybe letting down other people that are invested in you. Has that been something that has been pervasive throughout your life and career, like in whether it's competing in sports growing up or, as a motivational factor for you in other pursuits as well?
I don't know. I think sports definitely has always been like a refuge place for me. It's kind of been like where like I get to excel, and it was where I could like be special, maybe in like where situations like I didn't have other opportunities to do so. And so like the fear of not being like doing well or not executing, like I don't know. I don't know exactly where it comes from, but it's there.
Yeah.
So knowing that Rogue is sorry, do you have a follow up?
Well, I was just going to say, I hear that a lot from people who spend a lot of time in team sports growing up, that, whether you did a mixture of individual or team sports, like almost the fear of letting down other people around you as like your cog in the bigger machine is almost a better motivator than just, someone who likes to work out by themselves or trains by themselves or competes in individual sports. And I don't know, that just message kind of resonates with me. And I think there are a lot of people who use that, which is why maybe for some people, training in an environment with other athletes is a motivator. So
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense actually. I did team sports, like lacrosse was kind of my main thing growing up, so that probably might be where it came from.
and lacrosse is one where like there are some team sports where you can mess up, and when it's like your time to do your job, and it can get covered up. I don't know. Maybe I played lacrosse in college, and I feel like that's one where if you're carrying the ball, or if you're someone that is a primary cog in the offensive side or defensive side and you mess up, it gets highlighted really, really quick. And so you don't want to be the one that's standing there like with your head in your hands, looking like a fool. So
Totally.
So with the finish coming off of the games and you kind of having these expectations, when you look at a competition like Rogue, what is the mindset? Is it just a check-in to see how you fare against the field again? Is it thinking about placement and prize purse? Like what is the carrot that you're trying to get from it?
I mean, yeah, I feel like right now, just unfortunately, like with like some stuff going on physically, like my wrist and a couple things. Like I want to be realistic, but like the competitor in me is like, I want to like go and like do well. Like I'd love to podium or like, you know, kind of make a statement. Obviously that programming usually is like favor stuff I like. So I want to do well. I don't want to just show up to show up. But I also have to just accept where I'm at once I get there and know that like at the end of the day, it is just a stepping stone. So I kind of have like mixed feelings. Like part of me is like, I just want to fucking win. And then the other part is like, that might not be realistic where you're at. And like, if that's the case, you kind of just have to accept it.
Mm-hmm. How's the wrist coming along? I know we chatted a little bit in Kawaii, just the nature of a wrist injury is very fickle and kind of nagging. And I'm just, any update or how it's progressing?
I feel so like it sounds so ridiculous. So I have a bone bruise, which to me just sounds like, oh, you have a boo boo, but it hurts so bad. And it's like a slow thing. Like essentially, there's not something you can do to like speed it up other than just like respect it. And obviously, I'm trying all the extra things like red light and some blood flow restriction stuff, but it just takes its time. I mean, obviously, it's a lot better than when it originally happened, and I can mimic a lot of movements with like dumbbells or just like kind of alter my positioning, and I can do most things. There's just like a couple things like my snatch and overhead squats, which I need to work on that I can't quite.
I think that's what Travis Mayer did to his wrist.
A bone
It
bruise?
was a bone bruise, I think.
It's definitely, yeah, it's a weird, I like trained in both wrists. This was like the first day back at the gym, like back to like a structured training day. And both my wrists were like irritated in the workout, but I was like, oh, it's just because, you know, you don't do CrossFit for a while and CrossFit's annoying on your wrists. And the next day I woke up and one of them was like super swollen and like hurt to like do anything. I was like, that's weird. It's just a very strange ordeal, but getting through it.
Are you doing any other off-season competitions other than Rogue?
I'm potentially doing Team of 3 Wadapalooza. That's on the docket. Otherwise, I don't think so. I think Justin and I really just want this to be like a building blocks year and like have more time to train.
Who are your other two teammates going to be?
Yeah, I was going to say, you're going to run it back after the AKA Humble Killers?
I wish. I love Carrie and Ariel. But Carrie's, I think, officially like retired now.
No one ever is officially retired in CrossFit.
for the time being, I guess. I don't think I.
Okay.
No, but I think Sarah Sigmundsdottir and then Caitlin Van Zeel. So us
fun.
All right.
Love that.
Nice.
You got UN of fitness right there.
You got a Viking and an Australian gladiator on your team. I like it. I like that. I like that vibe you guys got going on.
That's outstanding.
Yeah.
Well,
do you have team names in mind?
No, I guess I'll have to text him after this and start.
You mentioned aerobic capacity work, obviously with Hinshaw, snatch work, overhead squat stuff. Is there anything else in your kind of like tool bag that you're really excited to work on and sharpen in the off season?
I just like obviously just want to get like fitter.
You and me both.
Yeah, like
Same.
Like my strengths are like the high skill stuff, so like I don't feel like I have to work so much on muscle ups or rope climbs or things like that. But like for me, it's just like basic CrossFit. Like if you give me like a 10-minute AMRAP with like burpees, chest to bar, and like a light thruster, like I'm hurting. Like so I have to work on that kind of stuff.
Yeah. The stars, they're just like us.
Yep, exactly. Just a lot better. So, Alex, thanks so much for taking the time to do this. We really appreciate it. Best of luck at Rogue, and I hope you're back to 100% soon.
Thank you guys so much. And again, thank you for being patient with me driving.
Oh, not a problem. Our pleasure. Thanks for doing this.
Get your hammy healed.